We have a poll in our live chat room this morning here on YouTube. If you're watching us live, here's the question. Will Donald Trump come up with $500 million by the end of today? Yes or no? I honestly have no idea. He usually Houdinis himself out of these predicaments, but not always. So please, if you're watching me live right now on YouTube, go into the chat room and participate in our poll, and I'll have the results at the end of today's program. The United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia announced on Friday that a wealthy Atlanta meat market owner has been sentenced to federal prison after ripping off the government's food stamp program to the tune of $10 million. $10 million. The Department of Justice said that the conviction of Utam Halder should send a signal to the American people that it is a serious crime stealing from taxpayers, especially when it comes to food stamps, which is part of our nation's sacred social safety net. The arrest of Utam Halder, a successful meat market owner, should send a message to everyone that nobody is above the law, unless, of course, you're Florida Senator Rick Scott, whose health care company ripped off Medicare and Medicaid to the tune of $1 billion. $1 billion. Not $10 million like Utam Halder. $1 billion. Senator Rick Scott of Florida ripped off Medicare and Medicaid to the tune of $1 billion. He never went to prison like Utam Halder. Instead, Senator Rick Scott's company paid the fine, and he went on to become governor of Florida and is now running for re-election as a United States senator. Never went to prison for ripping off Medicare and Medicaid to the tune of $1 billion. But we need to set an example with Utam Halder, a man of color who stole $10 million. This is the mop-up for Monday, March 25th, 2024, a day for Donald Trump that has been living in infamy for at least a month, ever since New York Judge Arthur Engoron hit him with a $500 million fine. And this is the day Donald Trump must cough up $500 million after a New York City civil court found Trump guilty of inflating the value of his properties in order to secure favorable interest rates from lenders. Today is Judgment Day for Donald Trump. He either writes a check for $500 million or posts a bond for about $600 million, which, according to New York state law, would be deposited in an escrow account and then either turned over to him if he wins on appeal, or it gets turned over to the state of New York in the more likely event that Trump loses on appeal. As you all know, Donald Trump claims to have approached 30 lenders to post that bond, and they all turned him down. But New York State Attorney General Letitia James, who brought the trial, she wants to see proof that Trump actually reached out to those lenders. Letitia James is claiming, or at least pretending, that she believes Trump has the money to pay the fine. But she says she will begin seizing his properties as early as today. But before we get ahead of ourselves, sadly, nobody's putting padlocks on Trump Tower this afternoon if Trump doesn't pony up the $500 million. Most financial insiders and lawyers agree that New York State Attorney General Letitia James is first going to seize Donald Trump's bank accounts because that's the easiest place to find cash and the hardest place for Donald Trump to hide it. That being said, earlier this month, she has begun filing paperwork in Westchester County, north of New York City. And that suggests she could be ready to seize property that includes Trump's golf course, one of his homes, and several parcels of land his idiot son Eric has been trying to develop to eventually sell off as hideous, ugly McMansions. So let me walk you through how today is probably going to end up for Donald Trump. His day will start in a New York City courtroom where he faces 34 felony charges for falsifying business records in order to pay hush money to porn star Stormy Daniels in the lead up to the 2016 presidential election. Forget about the $500 million he needs to pony up. His criminal trial begins today. Jury selection, however, was supposed to have already started, and today should have been the very first day of his trial. But Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg agreed to a 30-day delay so he and Trump's attorneys could pore over new evidence turned over by the Justice Department at the last minute. Trump must be in court for this trial today and every day of this trial, and the judge is holding a hearing today to determine why it took so long for our Justice Department to turn over all that evidence, which, according to the Manhattan District Attorney, is of no consequence. We are expecting this trial, which should have started today, to begin sometime after April 15th. Again, this is a trial taking place in the city of New York, which means should, God forbid, Donald Trump become president again, he lacks the pardon power to make it disappear. And, of course, the cloud hanging over Donald Trump's entire day is, can he write a check or post a bond for nearly $500 million to satisfy Judge Arthur Engoron, who found him guilty of defrauding lenders. Politico reports this morning that should Trump fail to come up with the money, New York State Attorney General Letitia James just doesn't order a sheriff to start seizing properties today. It's a somewhat drawn-out process where she has to go back into court and ask a judge, presumably Judge Arthur Engoron, for permission to gain access to Donald Trump's properties. Politico says Judge Engoron, would take about a week to decide whether to grant the state access to Trump's properties. Assuming Judge Engoron comes back with an affirmative, Politico says Trump will have, quote, extraordinarily limited rights of appeal. He won't be able to appeal this. Politico spoke with an expert on this who said he's never heard of anybody appealing this type of asset seizure. But we're talking about Donald Trump, so of course Donald Trump will appeal this. Politico says the New York State Attorney General is not limited to New York. She can start seizing properties all over America and, depending on international treaties, all over the world, like Russia. What does he own in Russia? Mar-a-Lago wouldn't be seized since Trump lists that as his primary residence, and Florida has strict homesteading laws protecting residents from getting their primary residences seized by the courts. It's why O.J. Simpson moved to Florida after he lost the civil lawsuit against the Goldman family. Politico is reporting that New York State Attorney General Letitia James will not be limited to seizing just real estate. She can go after his hideous jewelry, his cars, his paintings, if he has any, you name it. She can go after anything he owns, including, dare I say, his jet. Oh, no, not Trump Force One, CNN reports the most likely scenario will be the seizure of Trump's bank accounts because property of any kind other than cash is too difficult to find. And then you need to discover how many liens there are against that property. And of course, then you have to sell off the property. Trump's office buildings are probably impossible to sell. Commercial real estate right now is down about 40% since Donald Trump crapped the bed on COVID. You know, if he had paid attention to the early warning signs of COVID, not only would 1 million Americans still be alive today, his office buildings would be worth a lot more. Well, if Letitia James does decide to go ahead and start seizing his properties, the sheriff would put padlocks on the doors, and then a public auction would be held in 63 days. It would be a fire sale, which means it would sell even cheaper. Now, the problem with seizing Trump's real estate is Trump doesn't own any of it. Padlocking the doors to Trump Tower, for example, is never going to happen because Trump only owns the retail space and the penthouse, we think. So we could see padlocks on those doors, the doors to the retail space and the doors to the penthouse. But who knows if Donald Trump really owns the penthouse and the retail space anymore. We know that his ex-wife, Melania, is living in Trump Tower in the penthouse. And we also know she renegotiated her post-nup, and she's also looking for her exit. It wouldn't surprise me if the penthouse at Trump Tower is already in her name or her father's name. Who died, the mother or the father, whoever, or a sister's name. It wouldn't surprise me if the retail space at Trump Tower, if she negotiated to get that into Barron, their son's name, and who knows if they're even still married. But all I know is Donald Trump and Melania had years to figure out how to make sure Melania had a place to live and an income stream before this whole house of cards collapsed. And it looks like it's collapsing. Probably not today, probably not tomorrow, but a year from now. I don't know. I know that the onion is getting peeled back slowly, and it is delicious, savoring every morsel. Enjoy this. As I said earlier, there's been reporting that this month, a week after Judge Arthur Engoron fined Trump $500 million, the New York State Attorney General Letitia James filed paperwork north of New York City in Westchester County to lay siege to Trump's private estate known as Seven Springs, which his idiot son has been developing as a gated community. Also, she would seize Briarcliff Manor, Trump's Westchester golf course, and nobody knows why she's eyeing those properties first. Perhaps she's gone over his books, we know that, so perhaps she knows that these might be the only properties Trump actually owns or hasn't borrowed against. Trump is running out of options. A lot of people think he might declare bankruptcy for the 7th time. But this is an election year, and there's much shame associated with bankruptcy, especially in the middle of a race for president, where Donald Trump's calling card among his MAGA morons is that he's a smart businessman. Bankruptcy isn't going to look too good, right? But, with the MAGA morons, if he declares bankruptcy, you know what they're going to say. You know what they're going to say. He's smart. It's smart to declare bankruptcy. That's a smart thing. He's eating cat food and living in a cardboard box. That's smart. That's what a billionaire does. Donating plasma to pay for tanning spray? Incredibly smart move on his part. That's what they're going to say. Robbing a liquor store for a fresh pair of diapers? This man is playing three-dimensional chess. He is so ahead of everybody. That's what the MAGA morons are going to say. It's a religion. He's like the church. He doesn't pay taxes, but the church at least owns property. He doesn't own any property. So I don't think bankruptcy for Donald Trump is going to be an option. And right before we started this morning's show, I remembered that New York State Attorney General Letitia James has had a very, very, very busy year, and a successful one. You might not remember, she destroyed the National Rifle Association in February. She was able to secure a multi-million-dollar settlement against the top executives of the NRA, as well as the NRA itself, for engaging in massive fraud, ripping off donors to the tune of nearly $50 million. I bring this up because the NRA was chartered in New York State, which is why New York State Attorney General Letitia James had jurisdiction to sue for fraud. And one of the ways the NRA tried to avoid her civil lawsuit was by trying to declare bankruptcy, trying to dissolve the NRA corporation, and then rechartering itself in gun-friendly Texas. But a New York judge disallowed the bankruptcy. The judge said, oh no, you're not broke, NRA. You're just trying to avoid Letitia James' civil lawsuit. So, back to Donald Trump declaring bankruptcy. He could try and declare bankruptcy, but he would probably find himself in the same exact boat as the NRA was when that judge disallowed the bankruptcy. You're probably going to hear a judge say to Donald Trump the same thing the judge said to the NRA. You're not allowed to use the bankruptcy courts to get out of paying your debts. So bankruptcy, not an option, I don't think. Trump right now is appealing the size of the judgment. He thinks $500 million violates the Eighth Amendment, and he's also appealing the size of the bond that he is supposedly going to post later today, but he says he can't. I don't know how these things work. Because it's Donald Trump, one can imagine a judge stepping up at the 11th hour today and giving him a reprieve, or granting him more time to come up with the money, or even saying the fine is too large because it's Donald Trump. So that wouldn't surprise me. One of the things I've learned long ago, before Donald Trump even became president, one of the things I learned is that for Donald Trump, the law is just a recommendation. We recommend that you not illegally evict the tenants of the single-room occupancy because it's going to create a homeless problem. It's against the law, Donald. We recommend that you don't break it. There'll be no consequences, but we recommend that you don't break it. I grew up in New York. I remember Donald Trump in the 80s. We recommend you keep your promise, Donald Trump, not to demolish the priceless fixtures inside Bonwit Teller before you knock it down, so you can donate it to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and that's why we've given you this tax break. We recommend that you obey the law, obey the contract you signed with the city of New York. You'll still get your tax break after you illegally demolish the fixtures and don't give them to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, but we recommend you obey the law. So I have no idea how today ends. We have a poll in our chat room. If you're watching me live right now on YouTube, please participate in the poll. It's a very simple question that I don't know the answer to. By the end of today, will Donald Trump come up with $500 million? I don't know. Maybe he doesn't come up with the money today, and Letitia James, New York State Attorney General, begins to seize his bank accounts. And then Trump's lawyers do what they do best by tying that asset seizure up in the courts, which we know is going to happen no matter what. And by the way, I'm going to get to Truth Social soon. I know everybody's excited about the $4 billion he's supposedly going to get today from Truth Social. I'll talk about that in a little while. So we do know that no matter what happens, if he doesn't come up with the money, his lawyers are going to be tying everything up in court. Delay, delay, delay. This is what you can do when you have a super PAC funneling hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to your lawyers. Ever since he left office, he's raised hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars because Trump's idiot donors send him cash thinking he's going to use it to investigate voter fraud or he's going to use it to get himself elected president. Instead, he hands it over to lawyers who are more than happy, thrilled to grind the wheels of justice to a halt. If you have the money, you can grind the wheels of justice to a halt. For example, yesterday was the 35th anniversary of the Exxon Valdez tanker spilling 11 million gallons of crude oil into Alaska's Prince William Sound. Hundreds of thousands of seabirds, otters, whales, and seals were killed as the oil washed up on nearly 1,300 miles of pristine coastline. The economies of entire villages were wiped out. 20 years later, we're now looking, it was 89, so it was 35 years ago. I think my math is correct. 20 years after the spill, Exxon still hadn't paid the court-ordered fines. By the time Exxon paid the punitive damages, it went from $5 billion, that's what they were initially fined, $5 billion. 20 years later, they settled for $500 million. They killed hundreds of thousands of otters, seabirds, whales, seals. Indigenous economies wiped out. They couldn't fish. They were initially fined $5 billion in punitive damages. By the time their lawyers went through the appeals process, ExxonMobil only had to pay $500 million in punitive damages because Exxon has an army of lawyers and a bottomless supply of cash. 20 years of justice delayed and then denied. It's hard to believe an oil company could be that immoral. This is the CEO of Exxon. His name is Darren Woods. Know that name, Darren Woods. If you meet somebody named Woods, say, are you the son or daughter of the mass murderer, the CEO of Exxon, Darren Woods? He earns $20 million a year killing us. He is the CEO of Exxon. Know the name. Know these names. Darren Woods, CEO of Exxon. Now, he wasn't the CEO of Exxon during the Exxon Valdez oil spill, but this monster has been fighting climate science and efforts to address climate catastrophe. He's been fighting it the second he took over. That would be Darren Woods, CEO of Exxon. Know the name. This is the face of evil. Darren Woods, CEO of Exxon. He is a mass murderer. Planet extinction. Primarily because of Darren Woods, CEO of Exxon. Darren Woods' predecessor was this monster, Rex Tillerson, who quit Exxon to become Donald Trump's very first Secretary of State. Here is Rex Tillerson back in 2013 as Vladimir Putin awards Tillerson Russia's highest honor, the Order of Friendship, for his, quote, significant contribution to strengthening cooperation in the energy sector. Tillerson eventually left the Trump White House after reportedly screaming at the top of his lungs, and I'm going to clean it up a little, but he screamed at the top of his lungs, Donald Trump is an effing moron, at the top of his lungs. What a genius. It took him to become Secretary of State for him to figure out that Donald Trump is an effing moron. Hey, I could have told him, but he had to become Secretary of State. CEO of Exxon, best friends with Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump makes him Secretary of State. A real diplomat. Now look, I know you're as angry and frustrated as I am right now. We all were hoping that Trump would be kicked to the curb today and he'd end up homeless. But come on, that's never going to happen. Did Rick Scott, the CEO of that healthcare company that stole $1 billion from Medicare and Medicaid, did he, not only didn't he go to prison, he didn't even have to pay any fines. The company did. Kept his fortune, became governor of Florida, and now he's running for re-election as a United States Senator. If you live in Florida, what are you waiting for? Mobilize. Anyway, Donald Trump, I was hoping that he'd end up homeless, but that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. I wish, because I grew up in New York City, and I remember all the homeless people Donald Trump created back in the 80s. And nothing would please me more than to be walking down Fifth Avenue and seeing Donald Trump in a cardboard box begging for $1. And I would unzip my fly and piss on him. But that's not going to happen because I can't pee in public. It's just, I can't do it. So... But I fantasize about peeing in public, and I also fantasize about peeing on Donald Trump. It's not going to happen. So my advice to myself is let's be grateful. We should enjoy today, no matter how it turns out. Enjoy the evisceration of Donald Trump. Delight in the fact that instead of that clean chop that we all wanted, for Donald Trump, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Enjoy his precarity. Enjoy his humiliation. Trump is from Manhattan, and actually he's from Queens, but he always wanted to make it in Manhattan, and he's always been trying to impress the blue bloods or Wall Street, the bankers. He's always been trying to impress the billionaires. But all he ever accomplished was conning his MAGA morons. And he doesn't respect them. They smell worse than he does. He wants respect from all the people who live on Park Avenue. And they now know, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Donald Trump's not only a con man, he's also broke. He knows that they know he's broke. And I'm hearing that's eating him alive. There are reports of Donald Trump breaking things, expensive things at Mar-a-Lago. He is humiliated. He is humiliated because the right people, the people he cares about, the smart people, not the MAGA morons, The smart people in New York, who he's always tried to impress, they know he can't come up with $500 million, and nobody will lend it to him because he doesn't have the collateral. It's a slow and painful demise for Donald Trump. I know we want instant gratification, but a slow and painful demise, that's the best kind. Again, I have every reason to believe someone will step forward today and lend him the money. Or he will continue what has been a slow motion car crash ever since he left office back in January of 2021. Whatever happens, the lawyers will delay, but over time, the courts will in fact peel back exactly how much money Donald Trump owes and to whom, and the drip, drip, drip of humiliation, this Chinese water torture, will continue to drive Donald Trump even madder than he already is, if such a thing is possible. So my advice, enjoy today no matter how it ends, because today will be the ultimate humiliation for Donald Trump, followed by a series of other ultimate humiliations for Donald Trump. He hates the fact that his lawyer twice went before Judge Engoron and then an appeals judge and begged like a pauper and said, my client cannot come up with $500 million, Your Honor. It's an impossibility. He doesn't have that kind of money. And, Your Honor, we tried 30 separate companies. Nobody will lend it to him. He's too big a risk. Donald Trump's whole identity is tied into being a wealthy, successful man. And now everybody except his MAGA morons knows that it's axiomatic. He's broke. He's a failure. And he hates that. Which is why on Friday he snapped. He completely lost it on Friday. Not just lost his mind, but lost future lawsuits. He defied all his lawyers' advice. He couldn't take it anymore, and he blurted out. His ego got the best of him. He said, I have $500 million in cash. He couldn't stand all the reporting that said he was broke. So he insisted, I have $500 million in cash. He wrote it on Truth Social. He said it at a campaign rally. And that's going to be a big problem for Donald Trump. Once again, his ego got the best of him. He couldn't take it. He disobeyed the lawyers. Now, I am not sure how this week plays out, but I do know Judge Arthur Engoron is going to ask Donald Trump. He's going to say, Mr. President, you just said last week you have the money. You said you have $500 million in cash, so why can't you write the check, Mr. Trump? Or, Mr. Trump, when you said you had $500 million in cash last week, was that just another in a series of lies about your wealth? The same lies that prompted me to fine you $500 million? Trump, on Friday, when he said, I've got $500 million, right there, he proved New York State Attorney General Letitia James, she proved her case against him. He justified the $500 million fine. He was found guilty of lying about his wealth. He swore he's never lied about his wealth, and yet one day he says he doesn't have $500 million to pay a fine, and the next day he says he does. Which one is it? Maybe he has it, maybe he doesn't. But one thing is for certain. Letitia James was absolutely right. Donald Trump lies about his finances, and he's still lying about them. All weekend, Donald Trump was taking to social media. When he was speaking to his MAGA morons, he was insisting, I have $500 million. But he says, I need it to run my company. So let's peel that back for a second. A successful businessman needs $500 million in reserves to keep his business in business, which either means he's lying or his businesses are hemorrhaging cash, which might explain why he's been reduced to hawking gaudy sneakers. He is also still perpetuating the lie that he needs that $500 million in cash to self-finance his presidential campaign, even though he has raised hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars since leaving office. And we know $50 million of that went to his lawyers just last year alone. God knows how much is going to his lawyers this year. $100 million, $200 million? He's not self-financing anything. How much does Donald Trump have? Nobody can say, because we have no idea how much he owes. He may not even know how much he owes. There's what he owes to lenders who are licensed to lend money, you know, the barely reputable lenders like Deutsche Bank. And then there's what he owes to disreputable lenders, the people who loan you money because nobody else will, the people who pay you to launder money for them. He owes them money as well. And this is what New York State Letitia James and Judge Arthur Engoron and a lot of people can't wait to sink their teeth into. Unraveling Donald Trump's 500 shell companies in New York State alone that each own tiny little pieces of Trump's properties. These are little shell companies that reportedly there are 500 in New York State alone. Shell companies for a shell game. Try to find where the money is. One of the reasons Trump's IRS audits have taken so long, and the last time I checked, I still believe his audits have not yet been concluded. One of the reasons they've taken so long is because there simply isn't enough manpower over at the IRS, or women power, or they power, over at the IRS to unravel the hundreds, if not thousands, of shell companies that Donald Trump has set up over the years. This is from the New York Times. I believe it's December 22nd, 2022. Headline, Trump audit shows depths of IRS funding woes. The agency, the IRS, lacks the resources to go after rich taxpayers. For years, a single revenue agent was responsible for the audits of Donald J. Trump, one revenue agent over at the IRS. When the democratically controlled House Ways and Means Committee got its hands on Trump's tax returns in 2022, we learned some stuff. Now, this was right around the time Joe Biden had passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which added $80 billion in additional funding to the IRS. It has since been cut by Republicans. It's down to, I think, $60 billion. But obviously the IRS was understaffed, and Donald Trump was taking advantage of it. The article goes on to say, this is December 22nd, 2022. Quote, with over 400 flow-through returns, so that's flow-through companies, where the shell companies, basically, with tax returns. With over 400 flow-through returns reported on the Form 1040, it is not possible to obtain the resources available to examine all potential issues, IRS agents said of Mr. Trump's tax returns in an internal memo that was released by the House Ways and Means Committee this week as part of its oversight of the mandatory presidential audit process. By the way, for some reason, his first 2 years in office, Donald Trump wasn't audited. The IRS is supposed to audit every president the second he takes office. For 2 years, he wasn't audited, and then Richie Neal became chairman of House Ways and Means and asked to see the audit, and they said, "What audit?" Anyway, that is one of the great mysteries of life. How rich or how broke, how poor is Donald Trump? What we do know from Pulitzer Prize reporting in the New York Times, they won a Pulitzer Prize for this reporting, is that when Donald Trump first took office, when he first became president, he only had $86 million in cash. And of that $86 million, he only had access to $60 million of that cash due to a complicated partnership he had set up. I think it was with Vornado, a real estate firm. So he had access to $60 million in cash. To you and me, that's a lot of money, but to somebody who claims to be a billionaire, it's pennies, especially since we all know he has massive debt on every property. And that's why he ran for president. We all know this. It was a branding exercise. He didn't expect to win. He figured, I'll just say whatever pops into my tiny head during the debates, that will increase the value of my brand, and onward and downward. But just like a bad movie, enough voters put him over the top in key battleground states, and he suddenly found himself in the Oval Office. And he was broke. He was broke when he was president. He owes money. Since leaving the White House, he's been able, this is reporting from the New York Times, he's been able to get more cash. The Times says he sold a golf course in the Bronx, and of course that hotel in Washington, D.C. he sold. So he's got some cash. The New York Times thinks maybe $200 million, but he has close to $1 billion in loans coming due over the next couple of years. Everything is mortgaged, which is why he famously referred to himself before becoming president as the king of debt. He wanted to be, he wants to be a king. He already was the king of debt. Again, why would he be selling sneakers? Why would a man pushing 80 be selling sneakers? Why would a man pushing 80 put himself through the punishing rigors of running for president, and then if he wins, he has to be president in his 80s? Why would he want to be president if he's a billionaire? Unless he needs the protection from loan sharks that only comes from being commander-in-chief. We are looking at the greatest con artist in American history. He is the greatest of all time, bigger than Bernie Madoff. And here's why. Just like Bernie Madoff, Trump got busted. He got caught. In fact, Trump has gotten caught hundreds of times. But unlike Bernie Madoff, he's still on the street, at least for the time being. And it looks like he has a chance of becoming president. He really doesn't. There's some new polls out. Biden got a huge bump in the polls from the State of the Union. But, if you squint your eyes and don't look too closely, you could believe that Donald Trump has a possibility of, after January 6th, still becoming president. As Don King would say only in America. Only in America. Here's the other amazing thing about Donald Trump. He's stupid. He really is stupid. And yet, look at how he's been able to bullshit his way into the commanding heights of both our government and the entire world economy. How did he do it? All of us, at one time in our lives, smoked a joint, stared into space, and came to the realization that it's all meaningless. It's just a game of smoke and mirrors. It's all fake. Nothing is real. Trump realized that without ever having to get stoned, and he used that knowledge, that realization, to become president of the United States while sitting on piles of unpaid IOUs owed to some of the deadliest mobsters in the universe. He truly is remarkable. Again, I loathe him. But there's a little part of me that thinks, wow, how did you do this? How did you do this? Now, let's talk about Truth Social. That's the big ace in the hole that we've been told about. Truth Social. We keep hearing that Trump is about to become $4 billion richer because Truth Social, his alternative to Twitter, has merged and is now a publicly traded stock, and it's made him $4 billion richer. That's what everybody says. And I've heard a lot of supposedly smart people say that, and I realize they don't read. You just need to read a little bit about Truth Social. Again, the timing is pretty amazing. The merger went through on Friday, just 3 days before Trump needs to come up with that $500 million that he has to pay in the New York State civil fraud judgment. Because it's Trump, it wouldn't surprise me if later today he cuts a check for the $500 million, all because he was able to borrow against the fictitious $4 billion worth of Truth Social stock he now supposedly owns. Maybe it begins trading on NASDAQ this morning. Nobody's quite sure. Wouldn't surprise me, only because it's Trump, Houdini. But anybody else, including Houdini, in the same exact situation, would not be able to borrow against the Truth Social stock. There are very strict laws governing newly issued stock. Very strict laws dictating when and how the majority shareholder, and that would be Donald Trump, how he would be allowed to sell the stock and or borrow against it. In other words, he cannot sell but the law says you cannot borrow against newly issued stock and you cannot sell it. You have to wait 6 months before you can sell it. But as they say in Silicon Valley or in Trump world, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission. Break the law and deal with the consequences later. That's how you build in New York City. You start building. You break the law, and then you get permission later. Nothing would get built in New York City if they didn't break the law. There's so much red tape. That's what Donald Trump knew from the minute he went into business. He learned that from his father. So, even though Trump's not allowed to borrow against the Truth Social stock, he'll do it anyway. Maybe. But borrow against the stock from whom? See, the stock is collateral. But is it really worth $4 billion? Who would hand him the money he needs, accepting Truth Social stock as collateral? It's really DJT. I'll get to that in a second. It's not called Truth Social stock. The ticker name is DJT. In other words, Donald Trump's DJT stock, his Truth Social stock, is worth $4 billion, the same way Mar-a-Lago is worth $4 billion. In other words, it isn't. Again, I can't wait to see how he Houdinis his way out of this today. How does today end? I can't wait to find out. I have a feeling it ends with a whimper, not a bang. I just think it's like the lawyers delaying and delaying and delaying. We have a poll in our chat room. If you're watching me live right now on YouTube, please answer the poll. Do you think he'll come up with $500 million today, yes or no? I have no idea. And I can't wait to find out. DJT, that's the new stock symbol for Trump Media, which Truth Social is a part of. And it's getting traded on the stock exchange, the NASDAQ, maybe starting today. DJT is the symbol because it's the initials for Donald J. Trump. He used DJT as a ticker symbol once before for another company that went bankrupt, his casino company. Right? He owned casinos, and they went bankrupt. This time around, DJT, the Truth Social stock, is what they call a meme stock. With meme stocks, the value isn't based on the fundamentals. It's based on fans gathering in chat rooms and juicing the stock. Remember AMC, right? They play games by juicing the stock. It's a form of market manipulation in many ways. But eventually, a meme stock trades on what it's actually worth. And DJT, like the man it's named after, is worthless. It's not worth $4 billion. According to this week's Economist, Truth Social, which is now owned by DJT, is quote-unquote bleeding money. Hard to believe. Donald Trump is running it. Before the merger, Truth Social had less than $2 million in cash. By the way, Devin Nunes runs Truth Social. Remember Devin Nunes, the lapdog who was chairman of the House Intelligence Committee? Last year, Truth Social lost nearly $50 million. Yeah, that's a Trump company. It's losing money since it began. But thanks to the merger, there is now an infusion of $300 million in cash. So, you have a company, Truth Social, that's losing money. But because of a merger, it now has $300 million. And somehow, Donald Trump's majority stake is worth $4 billion? This is being reported like it's true. And there's a $300 million cash infusion. Where, oh, where do you think that's going to end up? Research and development? Growing the business? Trump is going to become chairman of the board of DJT. Do you think for 1 second he's going to see a $300 million pile of cash and say, rainy day fund, or, hey, we need to keep this money and invest in our workers invest in our no. From what I've been reading, Truth Social isn't a business. Truth Social was supposed to be a right-wing alternative to Twitter. The only problem is Elon Musk bought Twitter and turned it into a right-wing alternative to Twitter and renamed it X. CNN is reporting that Truth Social only has 860,000 active accounts, which means Trump has more followers on Truth Social than there are people using it. CNN reports Truth Social doesn't even rank in the top 100 of social media apps downloaded on the Apple App Store. Since it launched in 2022, usage on Truth Social has plunged by nearly 40%. CNN reported that when Trump went on Truth Social during Joe Biden's State of the Union to offer a running commentary of mockery, the platform kept crashing. And it wasn't because there were so many people using it, just too many technical glitches. CNN says even though Truth Social bills itself as a forum for conservative thinkers, very few Republican politicians or high-profile pundits bother to post on it. So where did we get this idea that Trump is going to make $4 billion off Truth Social? According to the Financial Times, this valuation is based on Truth Social claiming it will hit 10 million users in 2024 and then double that to 20 million users in 2025. But as I just said earlier, CNN reports it has fewer than 1 million users last year. And it turns out that Trump's stake in Truth Social was supposedly $4 billion until it went public on Friday, upon which the stock immediately fell 14%, making Trump's stake worth $3 billion. It starts trading on the NASDAQ starting today. We think, maybe sometime this week. Legally, Donald Trump cannot sell any shares of his stock in DJT or borrow against them for the next 6 months. That's because a majority stakeholder isn't allowed to pump and dump. You're not allowed to take a company public and then immediately bail, leaving other investors with a stock whose valuation plummets because the guy upon which the entire company was built decided to bail. Majority stakeholders are only allowed to sell their shares gradually over time, and he has to wait 6 months before he sells any of it. However, the Financial Times is reporting that because Trump and his idiot son, Don Jr., are most likely going to be sitting on the board of directors, theoretically, according to the Financial Times, they could grant themselves permission to start selling shares immediately. Then, as the value of DJT plunges due to his bailing on it, that will most probably trigger more lawsuits than there already are. Trump is already being sued by 2 of the original founders of Truth Social. Like I said, the ticker symbol is DJT. It's going to be traded on NASDAQ. It's a meme stock, which means a lot of MAGA morons will try to artificially inflate the price for him. But eventually, Like the previous company that had the ticker symbol DJT, someone will be left holding the empty bag, and it won't be Trump. Or maybe this time it will be. Who knows? We're going to find out. Because, this time it's a little different. There's a court-ordered monitor watching every single financial transaction Donald Trump makes. So there are two ways to look at all this. One is, what does it take for this man to go to prison? Is he ever going to get what's coming to him? Or two, and this is the healthier way to look at all this, he's already gotten what's coming to him. Is this any way for a human being pushing 80 to live? Moving money around, moving debt around, having to go to Alabama because that's the only place you get respect, fending off civil fraud judgments, being sued for rape, and of course, 4 criminal trials. He's got to spend his day sitting in a Manhattan courtroom today. So as much as Trump is able to delay, he's still got to show up today. And he's going to be on the phone scrambling for $500 million. And every time he turns on the television, he sees that more than half the country knows he's broke. And it's driving him crazier than he already is. Look, I've talked to a lot of friends over the weekend. We're all terrified that he's going to be president again. But the thing to keep in mind is Trump got to where he is for one reason. He is a useful idiot. In the 70s, he was a useful idiot to Roy Cohn and the Italian mob, which controlled the pouring of cement in Manhattan, and they needed someone to build skyscrapers for them. He ended up going bankrupt. In the 80s, he was a useful idiot to shady casino operators who needed an idiot to unload their worthless Las Vegas and Atlantic City properties. He ended up going bankrupt again and again. And we think again. In the 90s, Donald Trump was a useful idiot to international bankers who wanted to launder money for Latin American drug dealers. He went bankrupt again. In the early 2000s, a few more bankruptcies later, he became a useful idiot to the Russian mob. And by 2015, with barely $50 million to his name and $1 billion in mortgages, $1 billion that he owed, he became a useful idiot to the richest man in the world, Vladimir Putin. And he also became a useful idiot to the oligarchs here in America who wanted someone to become president and lower their taxes. He is a useful idiot, but he's really a useless idiot. He fails at everything, which means even, God forbid, if he becomes president again, he'll fail at it again. Now, 1 million people died of COVID because he failed as president. And there'll be consequences. He'll probably extend his tax cuts for the rich, which are going to expire in 2025. But he will fail as he's no Hitler. He's no Hitler. He's going to fail as president. There will be casualties, but he will fail because we will fight him. We will defeat him even if he wins. But that means all the other problems facing our planet get neglected because fighting Nazis requires all our energy. And he's a Nazi. Not a good one, by the way. Hitler would not be proud of him. That's why we have to make sure he and his entire Republican Party lose in November. I'm asking you for 1 hour a week. That's all it takes. We all have problems with the Democratic Party. If you've listened to the show long enough, you know what I think of the Democratic Party. Doesn't matter. Go volunteer at your local Democratic Party headquarters. They'll give you marching orders. You'll meet interesting people. That's why it's called a party. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Let's go to our poll and find out what the chat room thinks. Thank you for showing up today. We have... That's why it's called a party. Sorry. Okay, we have 2,334 votes. If you are watching me live on YouTube right now, please vote. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. We have 2,340 votes. Here's the question. By the end of today, will Donald Trump come up with $500 million? And I'm going to give you 30 more seconds to vote. And in that 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you to please like this episode so I remain in your feed, please. And that's the best way. If you like this, I keep showing up in your feed. Please share this episode by copying and pasting the link and sharing it in a text message, email, or on social media. This is also a podcast, an audio podcast, so please download me wherever you get your audio. Okay, here are the results of the poll. By the end of today, will Trump come up with $500 million? With 2,475 votes, 35% of my audience says yes, they think Donald Trump will come up with $500 million. 65% say he won't come up with $500 million. It's going to be interesting. Thank you, Bob, in the chat room. Thank you for everybody watching me live. And I have a cold, but I'm jacked up on Sudafed, so I think I'm going to do another show tomorrow to discuss whatever happened. Thank you so much for spending time with me and allowing me to rant and rave. Bye.